Alright, y'all, so today I just wanted to do a quick review of Earth 1 Superman. I'm going to review the entire series in this video. There were currently 3 volumes of comics made for the Earth 1 DC imprint and the Superman title. This title was written mainly by J. Michael Straczynski, if I'm saying his last name correctly, and mostly illustrated by Davis. I think they got another artist for Volume 3, but that's besides the point. My review of these comics, my initial impressions. I gotta say, to be honest here, this was a fantastic series to read. I mean, this series was honestly like one of the best Superman comics I've ever read. To describe this to someone who hasn't even heard of it, Earth One was kind of an imprint to basically take a more realistic, darker, but also just take all these classic characters and refresh them into a new lens, right? Put them into like a new style, a new way of storytelling, and this is basically what a modern like adaptation of Superman was adapted like. Now, I could feel like too when you watch the film like Man of Steel, I feel like a lot of cues were taken from this book because there's like weirdly a lot of similarities in this run. But in my opinion, this is like Man of Steel done more right? Like I think this is realistic, more modern Superman, but actually done thoughtfully and true to the character. This comic book is overall fantastic. And I'm gonna kind of go into the highlights. Now they only made 3 volumes, and like the Earth One imprint itself, each volume is one continuous story, mainly like 4 issues of content. And I, for the most part, don't really have problems with these comics. I think the stories are fantastic. The first volume is mainly about Clark, who, in this version, is very unsure of himself, confused. He doesn't really know what to do with his powers. He doesn't know, and he wants to be a part of society, but he can't really because he's not one of them, right? And he wants to help people, but he doesn't quite know how to, right? And it's basically the whole story is about him becoming Superman. And I thought that this whole story was done pretty realistically. Clark tries multiple ways to succeed at life at helping people. He tries like giving some kind of formula to this company that could save lives. And then when it becomes clear that the company itself doesn't care about people's lives, that Clark has tried every other avenue, he decides to put on the costume, which in this version was crafted from like material from Krypton, but it was crafted by Martha Kent, which I really like that distinction compared to like the other origins where Superman's suit is like comes on a ship. I like the fact that his suit was crafted by his mom. I think it adds more context to why the suit looks the way it does with like the S and everything. And she's also the one that crafted the S, which I once again had to really like. They gave a little explanation of what the S is as well, basically representing that's a metaphor for like sun. He's a son of Earth, Kal-El. He's a son of Krypton, a lost planet. Really enjoy that stuff. The villain of the first book is this guy called Tyrell. He's like a alien that comes from like a planet close to Krypton. These 2 planets, Krypton and the planet that Tyrell's from, would constantly fight every 20 years until a mysterious force would come and basically give that race the tools to destroy Krypton, which they did. And they destroyed everyone on the planet except Clark, right? Clark or Kal-El was at the last minute, like the Origin, got off the planet. And basically, Tyrell has to look for the last son of Krypton and kill him. And basically, he invades, in this comic, he invades Earth with a whole fleet of ships, basically trying to provoke that race to, get this mysterious last son of Krypton out. And, for Clark's credit, he tries his best not to put the suit on at first until eventually it becomes very clear that he has to do something, right? He's like the only one really in the whole world who can do anything. And the 2 slug it out, with the help of Clark's ship, who also is revealed has like some kind of sentience, helps out Clark, it destroys the alien mothership, kills Tyrell. Also, he has some help with Jimmy Olsen and Lois Lane in this comic. And the book kind of ends with Clark, working at the Daily Planet. He decides firmly that he needs to create some kind of mask, not necessarily a real mask, but a mask as in Clark Kent, which is just overall a fantastic volume. I think it was a great origin story for Clark Kent Superman. I thought that the reasons why he became that character that we know in the comics and stuff made a lot of sense. I think the reaction to Superman in this world, this book also presents like a realistic scenario. Like if a character like Superman really existed, people would question him, people wouldn't be so sure of his actions, there'd be deep mistrust. So it also plays with that angle a bit in these comics, but I think it's done just more thoughtfully than compared to something like Man of Steel did, where Man of Steel, I think, while this book and that movie are quite similar, this book succeeds because number one, the Kents in this book are a lot more correct in their ideology, right? They give Clark the tools, they give him the wisdom to do the right thing, to believe in the right thing, that helping others just for the sake of helping others is extremely important, right? And you're not necessarily saying that, oh, Clark, you have to show yourself, but it's also like that's why they crafted the Superman suit for him, just in case he might need it. Just in case in the time and scenario where he might need that Superman suit, he can do things that no others can do, and he has to for the good reasons, right? I think that makes a lot of sense compared to Man of Steel, where Jonathan Kent in that whole movie is like, Clark, don't help people, don't reveal yourself. And then just even that infamous scene where he's in the tornado and he just tells Clark to stop, don't save him, which I just think is so dumb, right? I guess that that choice also impacted his Superman as a whole, but I don't know. To me, it's just like this comic compared to the movie, it feels like the comic is like it's like a realistic modern take, but done more thoughtfully, done more true to the character, which I really have to enjoy. The second volume kind of builds more on the relationships of the first one. Parasite is introduced in this comic, who, is inadvertently created somewhat by Superman due to the ship and stuff, and the government in this whole comic is trying to find a way to stop Superman somewhat because there's a deep mistrust of him. But as a result of those experiments, Parasite is created. Yes, that's classic Superman villain. And he's the same person here as he is like in the animated series, he's like a criminal. But I really like this take on Parasite. In this comic, he's presented as someone that sucks off people, like metaphorically. Like he kills animals, he eventually kills people, and he likes doing it, right? That's like a metaphor for what he would eventually become as Parasite, which is just, sucking the energy out of things. I really enjoyed this take. I think in the animated series, if I remember correctly, he was like some random criminal that happened to get dosed with chemicals. Here, I think his origin is a lot more realistic. I think it's a lot more metaphorical, and I really enjoyed it. And Superman has to fight Parasite while also learning to use his powers, and with the help of his ship as well, because the ship basically reveals more of the secrets and backstory to Clark, like where he's from and what his real name was and stuff. And after a pretty epic fight, he defeats Parasite, and I really enjoyed this volume. There's also a second character introduced. It also presents the whole thing with Lois too, and a new character called Lisa, who's kind of like this love interest character that at first I'll be honest, at first I didn't quite buy because I don't know if it's like, I'm not an expert on relationships or anything of that nature, but the way that she was coming on the Clark to me felt a bit like overly like not realistic. But then you find out more about her character, like she was an escort apparently, and she was abused and all these other factors. And to me, I'm like, okay, well, that makes some sense, right? I guess it makes some explanation for why she acts like that. And I really like their relationship. It kind of blossoms a bit, especially in the later volume. But I like their relationship. I think it's obviously different to the core mythology of Superman, because most continuities, it's like Lana and then eventually Lois. But I still like this new character. I thought she was pretty good. I also thought, too, the storyline with the heroin guy, who overdosed. It was pretty dark, especially considering it's a Superman story. The fact that he was messing with Lisa, and then he killed himself later after like scarring up his room and stuff and OD'd. That was a really dark and interesting contrast to like how Superman always helping people, but sometimes inadvertently, if he pushes too far on people, they can cause things to themselves that he didn't intend, like consequences. And that's a pretty dark angle, but I thought it was also pretty important to have that distinction. Um, there's also this part in the comic too where he like overthrows, like inadvertently overthrows a dictatorship. Basically, Superman getting involved with politics and countries and sovereignty. A line that I think obviously in the book when I was reading it, that was probably a mistake. Like obviously this dictator is bad, but when you get into Superman messing with regime changes and government, things become dicey, right? It's like it becomes very dicey, and obviously the world's trust of him deepens, doesn't deepen, and makes it even more worse, right? More mistrust. But I thought it was a very interesting. And overall, Volume 2 was still really great, just as the first one. I liked Parasite. I liked all the new characters. I liked Clark, settling in with the Daily Planet. I like how Lois doesn't trust Clark and like investigates him, because in the first comic or the first volume, I forgot to mention Clark got an interview with Superman, and that was like his big way into the Daily Planet. Who, in this comic, I like how too it's a struggling newspaper business, but then thanks to Superman and this whole alien conflict, gets boosted up in sales. I really enjoyed that. I like how she doesn't trust Clark and investigates him and Superman, and eventually kind of backs off, warning that Clark's a good person. And eventually throughout the volumes and stuff, she gets to like understand Superman, which I really enjoy. I thought that her character was really good. In Volume 3, things kind of hit the fan. For example, there's this new couple character that where the government this whole time is trying to figure out a way to stop Superman. Now they have some pretty different things to the main Superman mythology. They introduce a character called Alexandra Luthor and then Lex Luthor. They're a couple. Same thing as like Lex is still in this book, but he's like a drastically different character. His wife is way more like the Lex Luthor that we know in the main continuity. Lex Luthor in this version is much more sympathetic to Superman. He questions the moral dilemmas of creating weapons that could potentially hurt him, and the government's mistrust of him, right? And the two of them craft a weapon that basically, in the first volume when Tyrell pinned down Superman, I forgot to mention he used like red sunlight, basically Krypton's sun. In the comics, it's a comic thing. Like Krypton, like red sunlight usually takes away Superman's powers, because it's like Krypton's sun does that. Basically in the third volume, they craft a weapon that's able to replicate it. Then the big new villain Zod shows up, and basically at first pretends to like be friendly with Clark, but then we find out the big revelation. This kind of ties all the volumes together. We find out that Zod, in his anger because he was mad with Jor-El because he was the head of the Science Council, Zod wanted to like basically push Krypton into a new direction. There was a civil war. He had apparently lost it. And then at some point, he decides to just kill the whole planet by giving the other planet that hates Krypton tools to destroy it. And once all the Kryptonians wiped out, so there's like no evidence of what he did. And obviously goes on hunting. And basically Tyrell and those people in the first volume were working for him. That's the big twist. And honestly, I like it. It's obviously pretty different compared to like Man of Steel, which in that movie, like Zod just wants to like terraform Earth with the Codex, if I remember correctly. Well, in this book, he just wants to kill Kal-El, which is an interesting distinction. I think overall, it's a pretty interesting take. I think overall he's a pretty cool character. My only problem with this volume is I do think Zod's design looks a bit dumb. I prefer the Zod that we usually get in comics and TV shows and movies. Like even the one in Man of Steel looks significantly better than the one in this comic. Like in the comic, he looks like a hooded dude with blades. Like he could be like a regular Batman villain the way he looks, right? Or a Green Arrow villain. Like, I don't know. He just looks really dumb for me personally in this book. But other than that, I like their fight. He almost kills Superman in this volume. Lisa, his love interest, finds out he's Superman, and that's a very cool revelation in this book. Lois also learns to work better with Superman. And eventually, with the help of Lisa and eventually Lex Luthor, who decides to switch sides against his wife, who kind of wants to, she's siding with the government, wants to control and kill Superman. Where the whole Earth is also like, there's a weird thing where the whole Earth is taking making a blind eye to the fight between Zod and Superman, and Superman almost dies in this volume. If it wasn't for the help he got from other people, he probably would have died. But Lex decides to do the right thing. Shoots Zod with the red sunlight, weakens him, and ends up dying for it. But Superman was able to destroy and kill Zod in this book, which I really that was a very interesting distinction. And of course, the book kind of ends with setup that sadly we would never get to see. Lex, died. His wife weirdly blamed Superman, which is so strange to me, but I guess it makes some sense in her weird mind. And she calls herself Lex, which I don't know about that. And then we have Lisa and Clark's relationship. Now Lisa knows who Superman is. Their relationship basically becomes similar to what Lois and Clark's relationship in the main continuity would be. Their relationship grows. And Superman continues to be who he is in the comic. And overall, like I said before, I really liked this run. I thought it was really fantastic. I liked some of the origins changes, and the artwork overall from all volumes, and the writing and the dialogue was all very top notch. The artwork was fantastic. I don't think it was traditional comic book. I think a lot of it was painted stuff. But still overall fantastic art. I love Superman's costume. I love the look of all the creatures and the ships from Tyrell's invasion. Tyrell looked cool. I liked Zod's look to a degree, but like I said, I think he looks a bit cringy with the hood and the blades. Parasite looks better, especially like how the fact that he changes once he gets more power. But I do still prefer the animated series look over the one they use in the comic. But I do like his characterization and the writing for him way better than the animated series does. So that's definitely a pro. And I don't know, I liked all the side characters. I liked all the supporting characters. The new reinventions to certain things about, Superman's mythology, I think for the most part work. I do still prefer the traditional Krypton origin where Krypton destroyed itself with its selfish actions. Like in Man of Steel, they did that where they were messing with the core and stuff and caused that to blow up the planet. Well, here it's like a deliberate assassination by an alien race by Zod. That's a fine origin. It's very interesting. It's different from traditional Earth Superman mythology. I'm just not it's kind of a personal preference thing. I still prefer the traditional origin. What else? I think personally, like I said, I like all the relationships. I like a lot of the new characters. I like Lisa. I like Lois and Jemmy as always in the Daily Planet. I like the order of events and the writing. I like how Superman's also not perfect in this book. He makes mistakes. Like in the third volume, he basically comes out and he says that, yeah, messing with that country that I helped overthrow was stupid of me. I won't cross that line again. But also tells him that, yeah, I'm not your enemy, which I think was a total Superman thing to do. I like how he's a young Superman. He's still learning things. Like I said, I think the Zod thing was also really cool. I like how it tied it back to the first volume. That was very solid, and I think his actions were very smart. It's just the way that, like I said, he looks, I'm not the biggest fan of. And other than that, I think that's really a lot of the positives. I don't really have too much negatives. I would highly recommend Earth 1 Superman to someone that doesn't really know too much about Superman. You don't need to know a lot about Superman, really. The book does all the explaining for you. I think it's a great new modern modern take on Superman. Something that I think Man of Steel really should have just taken lessons from. The only big thing that I can really criticize about it is I would say, number one, I do think the Lex thing at the end, for me personally, is fine. but I'm not the crazy. Like I think the way it happens, I don't like how Alexandra calls herself Lex at the end. That's just a weird thing to do. Like I feel like she could have just still called herself by that name. That's like one of my big problems with it. And I do wish that there was more characterization of some of the government people. But other than that, this was a fantastic Superman run. It's a classic, fantastic modern take on Superman. I would highly recommend it to someone that doesn't really read too much comics about Superman or anything. It's kind of like the better Man of Steel that we should have gotten, to be frankly honest with you. The only shame, too, is I wish they would make some kind of animated film about it. But yeah, overall, fantastic comic. Highly recommend. That was Superman Earth 1. Peace.